Oh shit. What's happening, everyone? Hope you're having a good Tuesday evening. Thanks for tuning on in to the Gabriel Speaks podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're on X, don't forget to, like and do the things. Would really appreciate it. We are going to cover a wide range of topics, my friends, because this last week almost seemed like a critical mass of both crazy shit in the news and crazy shit in UFO news. I usually kind of keep the two worlds separate, but they're so intertwined right now. Um, uh, I have to cover crazy shit on both sides. So today we're going to get into the Elizondo Lacatski difference of opinion, if you will. And of course, we have to pump up the drama, right, to get people to tune in. So I had my GPT make all these really cool looking, uh, you know, like they're gonna do a celebrity death match or something. But I love it. I love it. So Lou Elizondo and Lacatski, they've been going back and forth for a while. I did a video a long, long time ago. I think it was like one of the first videos I did covering this strangeness on Lou Elizondo versus Stephen Greer. And I think Greer got I think when we even out the points and tallied up the points and scored everybody, I think Greer ended up winning that one. But we're going to talk about those two gentlemen. We're going to also talk about these two gentlemen. If you've missed it, Rand Paul and I'm not even going to call him doctor. I'm just going to call him Fauci nuts. Rand Paul and Fauci nuts. And the reason he has the devil horns, folks, is that's what happens when you do research on Anthony Fauci. You start realizing, oh my God, this guy is Satan incarnate. Not kidding. So Rand Paul sticks it to him, and he has stuck it to him every opportunity he's gotten. Every time Fauci sat in front of him in any kind of oversight hearing on anything, he lets himself be known. We're going to talk about COVID just in general. There's all this disclosure talk about, are we heading towards this crazy alien disclosure thing? I don't know about that, but I do know what's been happening the last couple of weeks in DC has been disclosure of this COVID thing. If y'all haven't been paying attention, I got some highlights for us to go through as always. But there has been some interesting things being said in DC right now as they're investigating COVID. To me, that hits as heavy as disclosure to find out, was Anthony Fauci responsible for COVID? Like 3 to 4 million people died. I'm not saying he is, but we're asking the question. We're also, speaking of, Greer mentioned him a little bit earlier. We do have a snippet of him on Alex Jones talking a bit about future humans. And if you watch any of my stuff, that's something I'm really into. That story, I think, holds a lot of water for very many different reasons. At least is explaining part of the phenomena that some folks are experiencing. Part of it, not all of it. And then we're even going to touch on reptilians. Yes, my friends, reptilians. I have been fascinated with the story of the reptilians because I'm a Generation Xer, which means, when I was a kid, we didn't have computers. So we had to go out and play. And then when we were teenagers and young adults, we did have computers, and it kind of changed the whole world. And so we kind of just grew on with it. But reptilians were a story back in like the 90s. And the story was like they live underground, possibly like this ancient connection to like serpent type beings that have existed for thousands of years. And over a span of like 20 years, that somehow morphed to reptilians being even extraterrestrial. And I just thought that was so fascinating because they didn't start as extraterrestrial. So where am I missing the connection there? We're going to get into that a little bit as well. And then the CIA, y'all, the fucking Tulsi Gabbard is the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. All right. Not in her literal office, but in her office building, under lock and key, are the JFK files and the additional MK Ultra files that were ordered to be released by President Trump that need to be sorted through by the DNI's office, classified and all that before they can release it to the public. When President Trump was in China this last weekend, the CIA went into that building and took those documents. What in the fuck is going on? That is weird shit. That's fucking weird. And speaking of weird shit, this one's a heartbreaker, y'all. It is getting so tough for these Afghanistan people right now just to feed most of their children. They're selling some of their children. And we're not talking like teenagers so they can go work out in the fields. We're talking young ones to old, disgusting males. I cannot even imagine that choice as a father, but we're going to go over that a little bit as well. So first, we're going to go back, way back. It's about a 5-minute clip of David Icke. And this is kind of one of the first times they tied reptilians with extraterrestrials or maybe even future humans. Check this out.
It has emerged from my research that, bizarre as it may seem, a reptilian race from another world, interbred with humanity in the far ancient world, creating hybrid crossbreed bloodlines. You see references to these in the Old Testament and into endless of the ancient texts. In the Old Testament, it talks about the sons of God, which in the original is sons of the gods, plural, interbreeding with the daughters of men to create the hybrid race, the Nephilim. These gods were the literal gods of the ancient people, and they used to sacrifice people literally to the gods. And these crossbreed bloodlines, as ancient accounts tell around the world, were put into the positions of ruling royal power in the ancient world. And then, as is happening today, when you do the genealogy of the ruling families and the ruling positions of power in the world, be they the 42 presidents of the United States up to Bill Clinton, be they the British royal family, be the aristocracy of Europe, any of these key ruling elites, the top of the banking system, the top of the global business system, you hit the family lines which go back to these same ruling lines of the ancient world, royal lines, that the ancient accounts say were the crossbreeds between humanity and these reptilian gods.
I mean, I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication.
In other words, a reptilian extraterrestrial race has been controlling planet Earth for thousands of years to this day and putting its genetic compatible bloodlines into the positions of power.
These days, we believe that the people, the Chitauri people, they eat human brains. And strangely enough, scientists have found skulls where the human brain has been removed and eaten by someone or something.
You're saying that telepathy was the key form of communication for the Chitauri.
Now do yourself a favor, okay? Before you write Credo Matwa off and you think, oh, this guy's crazy. Do yourself a favor and just Google him and read his story.
The reptilians have.
Yes, sir.
That a reptilian race from another world has been behind the manipulation of humanity for a very, very long time. Now, what do these Chitauri actually look like, the reptiles?
I'm not a good artist, sir.
You're better than me, that's for sure.
But this is how we believe the Chitauri look like. We must stop denying the existence of these things. We must stop saying that there are no Chitauri, that there are no aliens, that there are no Illuminati. There are.
Even among conspiracy researchers, there's tremendous denial that the Chitauri, the Reptilians, and the Illuminati are actually the same thing.
Exactly, sir. Because amongst my people, we say that when two Chitauri are challenging each other for power.
This is where I think it's interesting because what he's saying is that these things have always been here and they have all these special abilities, but for some reason they keep us around. Maybe they need us on some level, but this gentleman is in South Africa. And this is like the 90s, maybe the mid or late 90s. So this isn't like he just hopped online and looked up some YouTube videos and was like, oh, reptilians. He is like a master. He's like where he is from, he passes stories from generation to generation. He is the person that's assigned to pass those stories on. And this is only about a 5-minute clip, but there are some absolute, do yourself a favor if you're interested in it. Look up David Icke and Credo Matwa on YouTube, and there are some pretty incredible claims in those videos.
And they must fight a duel with their terrible eyes.
Description of your abduction clearly is describing what has become known as the Greys, what I think is also known by some as the ant people, the grey figures with the big black eyes. How do you think they connect in with the openly reptilian? And do you think that the black covers of the eyes are covering some kind of reptilian truth?
Say, the so-called grey aliens are actually the lackeys and the servants of the Chitauri. They are.
Okay, but can we acknowledge for just a second that was like seriously probably the most evil laugh I've ever heard. I'm just saying.
People say who claim that these creatures are experimenting on us. That is a lot of rubbish. These creatures are harvesting us. These creatures are not aliens, Mr. Icke. These creatures are sexually compatible with our women. And what does that tell you? It tells you that they came from here.
They came from here, he says, which is like insane to think about. When did they come from here? Because that's when it gets really trippy with time travel, right? Is that it could be maybe some advanced civilization that existed way before we were around. And then it got wiped out and they're just hopping through time. It could be just us from the future, like the story that I've always been very fascinated with, the Dan Burris story, where you have, you know, P-47s, P-52s, you have the Orions, you have the Zeta Reticuli, you have the folks that escaped above ground into the stars, and you have the group of folks that escaped below ground into the tunneling system, what have you, and survived this great tragedy. And for whatever reason, this time frame is a time of critical mass, and that's why we've been seeing all this crazy activity since like the 30s, the 40s in our skies. You're from the future, you can't necessarily change things because you might mess things up, but you can try to nudge things and maybe not mess them up. Or you end up with the Berenstain Bears. I kid. All right. So David Icke, Credo Mutwa, there are literally hours and hours and hours of interviews with those two. I highly recommend, if you're interested in that topic at all, you bookmark those, you check those out, because they are super interesting and very, very insightful. Okay, now we're going to get to our news updates and some UFO update reel. Now, it is going to start with a couple of funnies, because I like to think I'm funny, even though I'm not very funny. But it's going to start with a couple of creative funnies. Please, y'all, these are just jokes. Don't take them personally. All right, here we go.
Yeah. And I took their blood. 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 Notice that an area of the brain, the caudate putamen, in many of these individuals was overdeveloped.
All right, so like, no joke, my first thought is like I kind of feel sorry for the guy, but then it gets like that. You ever see that show The Office? It gets like The Office awkward, Like super uncomfortable. Like, okay, buddy, let's move on. Have some dignity. He just backs up his shit and leaves. All right, no lie. One time when I was a teenager, one of my mom's friends wanted me to play a game of chess with him. And I played this game of chess with him. I didn't play chess. Like, I knew how to play it, but I didn't play chess. And I beat him. And he got so mad. He picked up the board and like threw it across the kitchen and like smacked the pieces off of the table and shit. Man, chess, I'm glad I didn't get into it because that's way too emotional for me.
We have learned since our interview with Luna, the CIA marched into the National Reconnaissance Office warehouse in the middle of the night and took files under the jurisdiction of DNI Tulsi Gabbard. It was not a raid, and the files were not given back.
Went in and took documents out of ODNI, multiple boxes pertaining to the JFK files as well as MK Ultra. There was an executive order that the president had directed the full declassification of JFK, but then also to the MK Ultra files. The CIA famously has said that, you know, all documents were released and other documents had been destroyed. So these are allegedly those documents that apparently never existed. And so very troubling. I did just talk to Chairman Comer, and we are sending in the next hour or so a preservation of documents request to the CIA. Well, the CIA does not have jurisdiction to work against an executive order by the president. And so the fact that someone did this when the president is out of country, from what I gather, I believe that Director Radcliffe is with him. And so this seems like it was an internal coup, to be honest.
Public health policy would have been very different had the American public been made aware that a virus from a lab in China was going to serve as the foundation for an emergency use authorization mRNA products being mandated by the former administration.
But we've known for many years that Dr. Fauci indeed covered up the pandemic for obvious reasons. He was funding gain-of-function research illegally at the Wuhan lab. It got out of control. They Frankensteined a virus, and it ended up killing millions of people and shutting down the world and damaging future generations in terms of education. The consequences are very far-reaching. There's no new news on the front that Fauci covered this up, but he can't really face that many consequences because Joe Biden gave him a pardon.
I think what Dr. Fauci did was on the level of human rights abuses and violations, and there is still a question on whether or not Joe Biden physically signed that pardon. We know that on our investigations on House oversight, many of the pardons are exact or identical matches with signatures, meaning that it's not possible unless it's done by something called AutoPen.
Damn, y'all. So AutoPen is something, friend of the show, Ryan's pointing at failure. One of the most viewed videos in my library talked about this, that he was actually personally impacted by a doctor who basically got him hooked on opioids, like legit, like a dealer, got him hooked on opioids, along with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of others. The doctor gets all this major time just like a drug dealer would. And he gets auto-pinned out before Biden leaves. So there are multiple pardons, and they gave Fauci a pardon before he was even charged. He hasn't even been charged with anything, y'all. Why do you give someone who's innocent, who hasn't been charged with anything, a pre-pardon, like a get out of jail free card? How the fuck does that work? And now we're finding out, and people that have been investigating this, don't knock me, because I've been waiting for more information to come out, like these hearings that have been going on for the last couple of weeks, to really research it more. But now that you have actual whistleblowers coming out and saying Fauci was into gain of function, both personally, professionally, and he had his money tied up in it. He needed this to work. And he was helping to fund, and we're going to listen to him debate this back and forth here momentarily. You'll hear his side of the story, which sounds like bullshit to me. But this guy might be responsible for one of the worst times in modern American history, maybe in the world. And he's writing books and doing podcasts. It's fucking crazy. And the second piece of that, since when can the CIA go into the Director of National Intelligence's evidence room and start taking evidence without anybody's knowledge or sign off or authorization? This is like them burning the Abu Ghraib tapes. This is like them burning what MK Ultra stuff they could before it got stopped. This is who the CIA is. Why do they act like they're guilty? Because they're fucking guilty. That's why. Of a lot. Especially in the UFO research field. They've done a lot. All right, we'll continue on here.
Lou, you've seen the videos that haven't yet been released.
Absolutely. And they'll blow
and
your
there's
mind.
a hell of a lot. You and I both know that there are much, much more impressive videos
There's
than the ones
absolutely
that
no
have been
question
seen.
about it. And I do believe that some of this is socialization. It's a bit of dipping your toe in the water before you decide to take a high dive and cannonball into the deep end.
This is what drives me nuts, right? These guys, all of them, I'm lumping all of them together. They talk about, oh, we want the truth to get out. We want the truth to get out. We want the truth to get out. But as soon as they have a little piece that they think they can cash in on, they keep it to themselves. And they say it's because, it's because of, it's top secret, it's classified. I don't want to put anybody in danger. But then they do a documentary showing said videos. It's so obvious, man. Leeches. It's terrible. Now, we're hearing new debate about this because Elizondo went on X and said that and tried to explain again for the 100 millionth time what ATIP was, but it's not working because ATIP wasn't a real funded program. Find me the documents where it says this was a funded program. OSAP and the DIRDs were a funded program. ATIP was not a funded program. And if it's not a funded program, it's a fucking hobby. That's how that works. Don't be naive. You think this guy just like got out and was going to be a hero for the people? No, there was a whole plan to make a whole bunch of money and to step on anyone that got in his way. And that's exactly what he tried to do. And now it's Mr. Nice Guy. Lacatski will tell you what OSAP is and what ATIP was. Friend of the show, Luis Cayetano, ufologyiscorrupt.com. Go to his site. He wrote a fucking paper on the confusion between ATIP and OSAP. It's all laid out for you there. You just got to do the work. You just got to do the research. And you don't have to do all of it. You can ask your AI to do some of it.
Okay, so James Lacatski, Jim Lacatski, is a former DIA intelligence analyst, rocket scientist, and director at the time of the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Special Systems Applications Program, or ORSAP. And there's been a long ding-dong going on between him and, let's name and shame, Luis Elizondo, who has talked about his role at ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. I still also don't understand why Lou can't make a clear clarification about what ATIP's role was in relation to ORSAP. I suspect there is a lot more there to be told. I would say that I would hope that no one is lying to Congress. However, I know differently in these hearings. I know that people have lied, James Lacatski said. He's a terrible tease, Jim, because he doesn't actually say who he's talking about. And so that's left fuel on the fire. It's inflamed speculation on social media about just who he's talking about. But the surrounding discussion and community analysis tie this directly to alleged misrepresentations of conflations involving ORSAP. Look, there is a bigger story here, and I think it has a lot to do with Lou Elizondo's true role as a counterintelligence official in the Defense Department. That's as far as I'm prepared to go. At some stage, Lou, I think, is going to have to give a clearer accounting of what his precise role was.
Once again, one of these guys acting like a gatekeeper. Well, I know the real deal, but I'm only prepared to share with you this. Okay, dickhead.
I do think that
it's not personal, Ross. I understand. That's the name of the game for these guys.
UAP commentary community, this is very unhealthy. I think as disclosure rolls out, hopefully in the next few months, I do.
Disclosure is rolling out in the next few months? What does that even mean? Disclosure is rolling out in the next few months. Okay, what's disclosure? Is disclosure because you've already released all these files saying, yep, these were legitimate. We were really investigating these things. We still can't explain these things. Essentially the X-Files. So yeah, there's a there is essentially what the government is saying. Isn't that disclosure? Have we not had it already? I think people just want answers. We live in this society where you can just type into AI, tell me what this is. And people want that. Okay, so there's NHI. What is this, Chat GPT? Well, it's not going to know. It's not going to tell you. You've got to go on your own journey and figure that out. It's not going to be easy. But they have said there's a there. And if you're not willing or just don't want to do the research, that's fine. But all the experiences, all the experiencers that have been coming forward for 70, 80 years, every single one of those cases should be reevaluated. looking at them through fresh eyes and indiscriminate eyes. We all know, like, Project Blue Book was there to disprove UFOs, and that's fine. Sometimes the best way to prove something is, or to prove something exists, is to try to prove that it doesn't. If you can't prove that it doesn't exist, that means it exists. So maybe that was the strategy. But Hynek saw very quickly, even though he continued the role, I think he saw very quickly that on top of that, they were sweeping legitimate things under the rug because they didn't want people concerned, and so on and so forth. And the story goes on and on and on. And every 20 years, every 30 years, we have this new push, this new information that came out, this new person that's talking now that wasn't talking before. I'm not kidding y'all. It's like cyclical. I have on my computer, like the 1968, I think it was, UFO hearings. There was all kinds of people there. Sarfati was there. That guy's name I can't pronounce is Yunik or whatever. There was all kinds of people there. What happened? Nothing. Disclosure isn't going to be a layup. They've told you there's a there. I don't think it's going to be spoon fed to you. Like if you're expecting the Steven Spielberg movie to answer your questions, no. You're going to find the answers to those questions in here and in here, not anywhere else. All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
It's going to become clearer about what the prescribed roles were of certain individuals and whether the UAP community has been given the full story.
Some of the ones that have been seen are actually our descendants from 500,000 years in the future that have come back to warn us about what we're doing. I mean, well, for example, at Rendlesham Forest, Bent Waters Air Force Base in the early 1980s, there was a landing of a pyramid-shaped black onyx craft, and we have multiple whistleblowers for that. What people don't know is that the senior U.S. military Air Force people who were there had an encounter with very tall, luminous white beings that floated through the shell of the craft, communicated with them and said, we are your descendants from 500,000 years in the future, where humans had become interstellar and evolved into these incredibly amazing spiritual beings, but we're also going out throughout the time.
How crazy is that? Again, that's something I've referenced since I first started looking into this. That maybe what we're looking at there is us in the mirror. Just thousands and thousands and thousands of years of evolution. And you could say that body type and those eyes would be conducive with living in an area with not a lot of light. Think of how much we've changed just in the last 10,000 years. Now imagine living in a tunnel system for generations, 50, 60,000 years. The body is going to change dramatically. That's how life works. It's going to adapt. So all that time goes by and you're stuck in a fucking tunnel. So you got a lot of time to work on physics and shit like that. And that's what they're doing, figuring a way out to fix it. That's kind of the rough theory I believe. So when Greer says something like that, to me, that's just more kind of confirmation a little bit on my part. I mean, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, but we've heard it from so many people, especially people that are educated, that that is a part of it.
Have knock on public.
Okay, now this is from Jeremy Corbell's documentary Sleeping Dog. He pushed this out on X, so I'm hoping I don't get a strike for it. This was something he pushed out, wanted everybody to see. This is a conversation he had with Dylan Borland at one point.
The only thing that I have done is ensure if I die, this story comes out.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker, Jeremy, is I don't trust the government so much that I don't even want to go into witness protection. I don't even want to fucking tell anybody. One, because I don't know if I can even legally tell anybody. And two, I don't trust them to not fuck me up more. They've ruined my life. They've ruined my friend's life. They're in process of fucking with everybody else. And we're just all fine with it. No big deal. Like, this whole thing sucks, man. It sucks. I want to know what is happening with my life. Like, I deserve to know that.
You do.
And I can't keep living like this. Like, I got married a month before I went down there.
Right.
My entire marriage has been wrapped up with this, and my wife left her job over this shit because I didn't want them going after her.
I'm tracking everything, so at least be knowledgeable that somebody is tracking everything for you.
I was told by an ODNI agent that Dylan testified to ICIG, the police of the intelligence agencies, that there is a UFO program, and it's called Rubik's Cube. That's what he said. That's what I heard from the ODNI, which they shouldn't be calling me and telling me what was described in the skiff, should they? Right. So I'm a journalist, so I listen, and I'm testifying to you, believe me or not. I'm a bearded tattooed journalist with a great mentor. You don't need to believe me. Project Rubik's Cube. Dylan, I'm not even looking at you. Have you ever testified to ICIG about a UAP program containing UAP called Project Rubik's Cube?
I am not in a skiff. I am not going to jail. I can neither confirm or deny, but if you want me to answer that question, as per amnesty for the whistleblowers, as Congress and the executive branch should give it to us, and I'll answer that question gladly.
Okay, so first off, thanks for throwing me under the bus by asking me about a classified program I'm not supposed to speak about in public. Second, my wife is huge into body language, and I bet she would point out the fact that almost that entire scene, George Knapp is like leaning away, like he doesn't want to be a part of it. See that? He's good here, and then he hears Rubik's Cube, and he don't want to be there no more. I mean, look at that body language. Now, I've heard people say, "Oh, this was staged. This was fake." It might have been. They might have discussed what they were going to talk about. They probably did discuss what they were going to talk about before they went out there. Maybe that was Dylan reenacting his initial reaction, and they said, "Hey, do that again for the crowd or something." I'm not sure. But I have held out my opinion on a lot of the recent whistleblowers because we just don't know enough. I like to crack jokes, but yeah, I mean, at this point, we just don't know enough. And I think the only thing that's going to show us if what they're saying is true or not is time. It's going to be time. Love and tenderness. Now, this was some crazy footage from Jeremy's laptop, which he also pushed out on X. And I thought I would share just a couple of these images with you. I am not a video expert. I don't know if there are things or refractions or reflections or fields. I don't know, but I do know they look very, very interesting. Some crazy shit, right? And heard a lot of rumors that some of the videos that Luna's requested the release for that we're still waiting on, that some of those are going to be quite shocking from what we hear. Word on the street is there's going to be some USOs, which is the submergible ocean type UFO videos in this one, like that we saw at the last UAP hearing where Dylan Borland was at. Those were crazy, right? Because those, I mean, they legit came right out of the ocean, levitated, made a formation, took off. And the gentleman that told us about that was still serving active duty. So like the next day he went back to work. So those are like crazy stories. So again, there's 100% a there. But the answer of what that is going to be complicated and hard to grasp, I think, including myself. I'm not above any of this. I'm just analyzing it, trying to mentally prepare for the mental gymnastics it may take to deal with NHI possibly in our daily life. I mean, the thing is, for me, I believe there are entities out there. I believe there are powers out there we don't understand. I do believe there are time traveling humans. To what degree and what effect they have on us, I don't know. Those are some theories that interest me. And I've had my own experiences. 2. Well, 3 if you count the other night when I was driving down the street and saw an orb fly over my car, a green one. So about 3 experiences now. I don't know what the fuck it is. But I'm not going to give up trying to figure it out. And I think for every piece of UFO history you soak in, yes, some of it is probably going to be bullshit propaganda. But find your authors you trust, find your researchers you trust, and research some of what they're researching. Don't just take don't just take my word for it. Research what they're talking about. And you'll start moving forward in your understanding. Okay, enough of that. We are going to go to the Fauci Round Paul. I want to call it like a celebrity death match, but I don't really consider either of them celebrities. But this is Fauci and Rand Paul over the years. And we've also, because recently we've gotten this document release, and I will add it to the notes after the show. We've got this document release showing that Icke Health was kind of the middleman in brokering this deal for gain of function research that Fauci was a part of at the actual Wuhan lab. Talk about disclosure, right? They're actually putting together who the bad guys were behind it, because make no mistake, there were bad guys. And one of them may have unknowingly unleashed this virus on us to begin with, because of the greed, the desire for breakthroughs and innovations and what you can charge for that and the amount of money you can make for that. 4 million lives lost and still ticking because of COVID. And when you see this gentleman talking in these hearings, you might puke in your mouth a little bit. I'm just warning you now. It's very possible.
Committee, Mr. Comer from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Daszak, how long have you been a collaborator with the Wuhan Institute of Virology?
I think since about 2003.
So during that time before the pandemic, were you aware of all the types of research occurring at the Wuhan lab?
We were aware of all the published information coming out of the lab and the people we met from the lab.
Were you aware that there was a Chinese military lab associated with Wuhan lab?
No, and I still am not aware of that.
In the fall of 2019, the Wuhan lab virus database was taken offline. Have you ever seen its full virus database?
No.
To your knowledge, did the Wuhan Institute conduct coronavirus research that did not involve Icke Health?
Yes.
So is it possible the Wuhan Institute has viruses or conducted experiments that they never published?
Yes.
Testified to your lack of knowledge regarding activities at the Wuhan lab. Is it possible COVID-19 was the result of a lab leak?
I've publicly stated that many times, including as a member of the WHO mission to investigate the COVID origins. All of us in the group unanimously
so yes,
voted that
it's possible, correct?
That it was possible, but extremely unlikely, based on the evidence we have.
Dr. Daszak, the U.S. intelligence community has been investigating the origins of COVID-19. During that investigation, were you ever contacted by any intelligence agencies?
Yes.
Which ones?
The CIA, the FBI, and the Defense Intelligence Agency.
I want to remind you that you are under oath. Other than the interactions that you just testified to, have you or do you have a standing relationship, either officially or unofficially, with any agency in the intelligence community?
No.
So you've never been an informant for the U.S. government?
You asked me if I have a standing relationship with any agencies in the intelligence community. The answer is no. I'm stating publicly that I do not have a standing relationship with the intelligence community. That was your question.
Have you ever been an informant for any U.S. intelligence agency?
Not to my knowledge. I've certainly, when they've asked me questions, I've provided answers, as any citizen of the U.S.
Like what types of questions? Did they ask you questions before the COVID outbreak?
I've spoken with FBI before the COVID outbreak, of course.
Did the U.S. intelligence community know what was going on in the Wuhan lab?
That's a question for the U.S. Intelligence Agency. I mean, we've supplied any information to any government agency.
So the U.S. Intelligence Agency was interested, because you had conversations with them prior to COVID, in what type of activity was taking place in the Wuhan lab?
And I believe they've asked many other scientists too.
How familiar would you state that the intelligence community was with what was going on in the Wuhan lab? Did the intelligence community believe that the Wuhan lab was being used by China to manufacture bioweapons?
Well, that's really for the intelligence community to answer. But in the public statements that they've made, two agencies, I think, have low to moderate confidence that there was some activity, and the other agencies were unable to comment. So I'm not sure they do have much information.
Do you find it troubling that, by all accounts from your testimony, the intelligence community suspected something fishy was going on at the Wuhan lab? Despite that, they still funded research with American taxpayer dollars at the Wuhan lab?
Well, I don't know that the intelligence community funded research there, but
the government did.
Yeah,
and the intelligence community is part of the government.
Sure. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I don't find it troubling at all. I don't think it's unusual.
Thank you for being here. In March of 2023, the Senate unanimously passed legislation requiring the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to declassify all, I believe the exact language is, declassify any and all information related to potential links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the origins of COVID-19. I have some familiarity with this legislation because I wrote it. When they finally did release the report, I think we've got a picture of it here that'll appear over my shoulder. It was all of 5 pages. Yeah. Here it is. Wait for it. 5 pages. Remember, the law says any and all information. 5 pages, heavily redacted, even the 5 pages. 5 pages. This is, according to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, this is any and all information related to COVID-19 and the Wuhan Virology Lab.
And I'll tell you a little story about that if you'd like.
Please.
A little story about your 5 pages there. So there was a classified report being written at the time all of this was going on. And I assumed as I'm reading through the documents that they would just take that classified report, which didn't look like that, and they would just redact it. And because I'm reading through the documents, but that is not what happened. They decided to write a different paper instead of what was already.
Who you say they? Who's they?
The National Intelligence Council.
The National Intelligence Council was at the time that the law passed was doing a thorough review. If it's not 5 pages, how many pages worth of information would you guess the United States government was in possession of related to Wuhan lab and COVID possible links?
I can tell you that Director Gabbard is working through, I believe, 2,000 pages.
2,000?
They're trying to get released in the first batch. This is the law states yes, any and all, but there's still the requirement to run it through the different agencies to ensure that there's not some sources and methods. But there's like 2,000 pages.
2,000 pages. 2,000 pages. I want to show you what Admiral Haynes, Director Haynes, said to me when I wrote to her, Senator Braun and I wrote to her following this outrageous, ridiculous report. She wrote back to me and said, well, we declassified only what we could without endangering sources and methods. Only what we could. 5 pages of summary that itself has redactions. The 5 pages have redactions.
I can tell you that the interagency process of declassification is highly bureaucratic, and that is being worked. And I think you saw just a few days ago, Director Gabbard released some information about the lab.
Was Director Haynes, Avril Haynes, was she involved in making the decision not to release the material?
I don't have any proof that she was involved in the direct decision. I have no emails saying that directly, but
it was her office, and it's her signature on the letter to me. It's her office that sent the 5 pages. She's the one who said, this is what we have. This is all we have. You're telling me there were 2,000 plus documents.
No, I'm
they
telling you
sent us
that
5.
the first swath of documents that
Oh,
we're
I see.
looking to, there's many more than that.
I got you. Many more. Let me tell you what this so-called 5-page report, what it said in its substance, to the extent there was any. They said, number one, that nothing that was researched at the Wuhan lab could plausibly be a progenitor of SARS-CoV-2. Number two, they said there is no evidence of any research-related incident involving Wuhan employees that might have been related to the pandemic. Now, in your experience, given what you have seen, are those true statements?
Some of that would have to be covered and classified, but no, they're not true.
You said in your opening statement that Dr. Fauci, speaking of someone who's not exactly a truth teller, that Dr. Fauci intervened to put his thumb on the scale of what information the intelligence community, the IC, could review when they did their initial assessments of whether or not the Wuhan lab was linked to COVID?
So he reached in and he provided this list of scientists and subject matter experts that we should talk to. And it's not like he's saying, you will go talk to them. He doesn't have the power to do that technically. It's just that the bureaucracy in place at the time was perfectly happy to pursue those recommendations, even when there was a number of individuals who expressed concern, saying, at least one for sure, that said, are you sure we want to do this? He's a policymaker, and we need to have our intelligence cycle.
And he had a point of view, did he not?
He certainly did.
And what was that point of view? Just refresh our memories.
He believes it's natural origin. He still does.
Of course. I mean, he said this over and over. Now, he would have reason to, given that he supported gain-of-function research to the Wuhan lab, lied about it to Congress, lied about it repeatedly to the chairman, as I recall. So his hands are dirty in this.
Oh, I don't know why I added my other intro video there. I think I was planning on doing 2 different spaces. Pretty interesting opening there, right? And that is just one whistleblower, government whistleblower, and the CEO for Icke Health. Not looking good. Not looking good when you have a congressman connecting the dots like that. Like, hold on. And here's another thing. Gain of function. You hear gain of function a lot. If you're a doctor, fantastic. I am not a doctor. The best I could understand it is it's when you are essentially adding a function to a biologic that it didn't have before. So like basically like if you could make a cold that a dog gets, you take that strain and you modify it so humans can get it. You've then added an ability to that strain. So you're going to hear that phrase a lot. Here, let me turn on the volume where we get to the intro. You're going to hear that phrase a lot coming up. And just so you understand, gain of function, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's when you're adding a function to the existing whatever it is that you are messing with, right? So if you add a 7th and 8th wheel to your giant truck, then there you go. You've done the same thing. All right, here we go.
You have said that I am unwilling to take any responsibility for the current pandemic. I have no responsibility for the current pandemic. The current pandemic, okay? Number 2, you said the overwhelming amount of evidence indicates that's a lab leak. I believe most card-carrying viral phylogenists and molecular virologists would disagree with you that is much more likely, even though we leave open all possibilities, it's much more likely that this was a natural occurrence. Third, you say we've
tested 80,000 animals and no animals have been found with COVID.
Senator Paul, the time is set first.
And third, you made a statement just a moment ago that's completely incorrect, where you say we continue to support research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You proved it in August of last year.
No, your statement says, quote, I wrote it down as you were writing. You continue to support research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You were in committee a month ago and said you still trust the Chinese scientists and you still support the research over there. You said it a month ago in committee.
Paul, I have allowed Dr. Fauci to respond. You've had your time. I'm going to give him.
He's going to be dishonest. He ought to be challenged.
You're not hearing what I'm saying about variants. We're talking about wild type
versus variants.
And what proof is there that there are significant reinfections with hospitalizations and death from the variants? None in our country. Zero.
Well, because we don't have a prevalent of a variant yet. We're having one. Can I finish? We're having 117 that's becoming more dominant.
Policy based on conjecture.
No,
it
isn't based on conjecture.
Variants, so you want people to wear a mask for another couple years.
No.
You've been vaccinated and you parade around in 2 masks for show. You're defying everything we know about immunity by telling people to wear a mask to have been vaccinated. No. Instead, you should be saying there is no science to say we're going to have a problem from the large number of people being vaccinated. You want to get rid of vaccine hesitancy? Tell them they can quit wearing their mask after they get the vaccine. You want people to get the vaccine? Give them a reward instead of telling them that the nanny state's going to be there for 3 more years and you got to wear a mask forever.
For the record, that masks are not theater. Masks are protective. And we
have immunity there, theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any science.
I totally disagree with you.
Dr. Fauci, we don't know whether the pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan or evolved naturally, but we should want to know. 3 million people have died from this pandemic, and that should cause us to explore all possibilities. Instead, government authorities, self-interested in continuing gain-of-function research, say there's nothing to see here. Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans. For years, Dr. Ralph Barrick, a virologist in the U.S., has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create superviruses. This gain-of-function research has been funded by the NIH. The collaboration between the U.S. and the Wuhan Virology Institute continues. Doctors Barrick and Shi worked together to insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the deadly SARS virus, and then use this man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect. We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina, not
You don't think inserting
in China.
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain-of-function?
That is
You would
not
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain-of-function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So do you still support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan Virology
Do you support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. Do you support that the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China.
Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function research in China. You are saying things that are not correct.
Dr. Barrick, an advocate of gain-of-function research, admits the main problem that the Institute of Virology has is the outbreak occurred in close proximity. What are the odds? Barrick responded, could you rule out a laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not. Will you, in front of this group, categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However,
okay, just some simple facts here. The FBI, the Department of Energy, and the CIA all investigated Wuhan, and all of them landed on a lab leak as being the most likely cause of COVID-19, which then puts Mr. Fauci in the hot seat, because now he's connected to funding EcoHealth's mission of gain of function research, essentially developing COVID. Is Dr. Fauci responsible for COVID?
I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain of function research.
Section 1001 of the U.S. Criminal Code creates a felony and a 5-year penalty for lying to Congress. On your last trip to our committee on May 11th, you stated that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And yet, gain of function research was done entirely in the Wuhan Institute by Dr. Shi and was funded by the NIH. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the Wuhan virology paper entitled Discovery of a Rich Gene Pool of Bat SARS-Related Coronaviruses. Please deliver a copy of the journal article to Dr. Fauci. In this paper, Dr. Shi credits the NIH and lists the actual number of the grant that she was given by the NIH. Viruses that in nature only infect animals were manipulated in the Wuhan lab to gain the function of infecting humans. This research fits the definition of the research that the NIH said was subject to the pause in 2014 to 2017, a pause in funding on gain of function. But the NIH failed to recognize this, defines it away, and it never came under any scrutiny. The Wuhan lab used NIH funding to construct novel chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses able to infect human cells and laboratory animals. This is high-risk research that creates new potential pandemic pathogens that exist only in the lab. Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not
literally a document showing that NIH funded, like, what am I missing here? There's the order number, there's the company name, there's what they actually funded, there's the results they were looking for. It's all right there in that memo. And he is straight looking at this man in the face and lying through his teeth.
Not being gain of function. What was, let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
Well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
And
that's where you see Fauci. He has so much confidence right here because he knows he's already got his auto-pinned pardon. He's got nothing to worry about. He can lie through his teeth. Or he could do the right thing and tell the truth, but that will not happen because we're talking money and greed and power. Very intoxicating. Hard to get a grown man away from that. So it's pretty incredible that, like, you can see he's going to take this to his grave because, and I get it, if a decision I made was the reason that 4 million people on this planet died, I would probably need to lie to myself to go to sleep at night. I mean, I'm just being real. You'd have to. Otherwise, you would do something you shouldn't do, right? Because that's a lot of weight to carry if you don't feel like, so who knows? Maybe karma's a bitch and he'll get what's coming to him, which is worse than jail. But to be so pompous, it's crazy.
You are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individual. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Dr. Fauci, I don't expect you today to admit that you approved of NIH funding for gain-of-function research in Wuhan, but your repeated denials have worn thin, and a majority of Americans, frankly, don't believe you. Even the NIH now admits that EcoHealth Alliance did perform experiments in Wuhan that created viruses not found in nature that actually did gain in lethality. The facts are clear. The NIH did fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan, despite your protestations. You can deny it all you want, but even the Chinese authors of the paper, in their paper, admit that viruses not found in nature were created, and yes, they gained in infectivity. Gain-of-function research, it was risky to share this with the Chinese, and that COVID may have been created from a not yet revealed virus. We don't anticipate the Chinese are going to reveal the virus if it came from their lab. You know that, but you continue to mislead. You continue to support NIH money going to Wuhan. You continue to say you trust the Chinese scientist. You appear to have learned nothing from this pandemic. Will you today finally take some responsibility for funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator, with all due respect, I disagree with so many of the things that you've said. First of all, gain of function is a very nebulous term.
Well, shocker, you disagree. I do want to say this. I got COVID. I believe I got it 2, maybe 3 times. And call me crazy, but there is something about that sickness that did not feel natural. It felt like very manufactured, like lose your taste, lose your sense of smell, be very tired, cloudy brain. Boom, 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 boom. And at some points, like a very bad flu where, it got rough. But for the most part, it was just extremely tired and like foggy brain. And I never in my whole life had any sickness that's had that kind of an effect on my neurological system. So I think it's 100% more than likely, in my opinion, was manufactured in Wuhan as part of this gain of function research. I mean, that's where all the arrows point. And anytime you see shady stuff, murders or crimes or power moves or coup de grace, anytime you see something like that, you're going to see this type of shit. You're going to see people making statements that are like so disconnected from reality that the regular people are going to lose their fucking minds and rise up. I mean, how much shit can they hit us with? Now we're finding out our own health guy might have started COVID. COVID, y'all. COVID, the one that fucked up our kids' school, the one that made work difficult, the one that had us paranoid for 2-3 years, the one where we lost friends and family members, that COVID. You're telling me this guy, to make more money, along with a few other suits, I'm sure, are the reason COVID happened. That makes, honestly, that makes more sense to me than like some kind of Chinese operation. Because that's real life, right? Like there are greedy fucks that are going to do anything they can for money, including selling out the human race. They don't care. As long as they got enough toys and money, they're good. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we have more millionaires and more billionaires in this country than we have ever had before. And there's only one of them, like Elon Musk, that's actually trying to make an impact. So strange.
We have spent, not us, but outside bodies, a considerable amount of effort to give a more precise definition to the type of research that is of concern that might lead to a dangerous situation. You are aware of that. That is called P3CO.
We're aware that you deleted gain of function from the NIH website.
Well, I can get back to that in a moment if we have time, but let's get back to the operating framework and guide rails of which we operate.
Let's quickly change the subject. Sorry for the screen change there, folks. Yeah, isn't that funny how he's called out and then immediately is like, well, we could maybe talk about that. But first, let's talk about this. So what Rand Paul is calling out there is that we saw in the 2021 hearings we saw him basically say, no. There was never gain of function. There was no funding from NCI to Wuhan. No, none of that. Nothing like that. Nothing like that ever happened. Cut to a couple years later and a couple document releases later. And the story is now, well, the money, we did give money sort of, but it was to this other like health company, and they were working in the Wuhan lab, and they were working on this stuff, but it didn't have, it wasn't gain of function, and we didn't have anything to bullshit. It was 100% gain of function. That's what COVID is. It's a developed virus. It was something else before it became COVID. Probably some version of the fucking swine flu or some bullshit. But there is nothing natural about that sickness. If you had it, I mean, maybe not everybody, but if you got it, That's the weirdest fucking flu ever. It is fucking strange.
And you have ignored them. The guidelines are very, very clear that you have to be dealing with a pathogen that clearly is shown and very likely to be highly transmissible in an uncontrollable way in humans and to have a high degree of morbidity and mortality, and that you do experiments to enhance that, hence the word EPPP, enhanced pathogens of
So when Eco Health Alliance took the virus SHC014 and combined it with WIV1 and caused a recombinant virus that doesn't exist in nature, and it made mice sicker, mice that had humanized cells, you're saying that that's not gain-of-function research?
According to the framework and guidelines.
So what you're doing is defining away gain-of-function. You're simply saying it doesn't exist because you changed the definition on the NIH website.
That's the thing to be aware of here, folks, is that he went back, and I'm sorry I forgot my point earlier. That was my whole point. He went back and he changed the definition and that way, when they were trying to pin him down in Congress, they couldn't. He changed what gain of function meant. And now he's acting like, even though he's the one that changed it, well, he has to follow that now. According to that explanation, no, it was not gain of function. So it was gain of function research. And then he himself went in and changed it and said, no, it's this other type of research, not gain of function. And then reported that he thinks that's okay. Like, I'm not the biggest Rand Paul fan, but that's not going to slip by Rand Paul. I'm sorry.
This is terrible, and you're completely trying to escape the idea that we should do something about trying to prevent a pandemic from leaking from a lab. There's the preponderance of evidence now points towards this coming from the lab, and what you've done is change the definition on your website to try to cover your ass, basically. That's what you've done. You've changed the website to try to have a new definition that doesn't include the risky research that's going on. Until you admit that it's risky, we're not going to get anywhere. You have to admit that this research was risky. The NIH has now rebuked them. Your own agency has rebuked them. But the thing is you're still unwilling to admit that they gained in function when they say they became sicker. They gained in lethality. It's a new virus. That's not gain of function?
According to the definition that is currently operable. And then on January of 2017, the Office of Science and Technology Policy of the White House issued the current policy.
And coincidentally,
I have not changed
the definition
any
appeared
definition.
On the same day the NIH said that yes, there was a gain of function in Wuhan, the same day the definition appeared, the new definition, to try to define away what's going on in Wuhan. Until you accept it, until you accept responsibility, we're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
You believe, and the information you're aware of, is that CIA scientists from an early time after the pandemic began, 2020, 2021, were concluding that the lab leak was the most likely hypothesis?
Yes, Senator. A lot of the issues occurred at the interagency space. At the National Intelligence Council, the individuals responsible for conducting or writing WMD analysis. So, and many of those individuals are on JDA from the CIA. Very early, as early as 2020, there were agencies within the IC circulating papers that that said, hey, there's, for example, DOE circulated a paper in May of 2020 that said that all the conditions were present for a lab leak. And I could go through the timeline, but yes, my short answer is yes, periodically throughout 2020 all the way to 2024. Yes.
I think the arguments, pro and con for what is the evidence on whether this came from a lab or it came from nature are still important. So for years, we've been asking the CIA to produce the scientists, either in a classified setting or a public setting, to discuss the arguments. I don't see any reason why the arguments should be classified. The source looks like it came from a single source of RNA, not like 5 different types of viruses or 20 different types like you had with SARS 2003, but it came from one source. And virtually everybody argues that sort of indicates a lab and not a nature. Your testimony is that the CIA scientists were concluding that it was lab, but then when this, there was a 90-day study in 2021, and this study was done by NIC. So when they had this study, they had CIA scientists telling them, look, the evidence, the scientific evidence looks like it came from the lab, but then they brought in Anthony Fauci.
Where did Dr. Anthony Fauci and when did he inject himself into the IC? And the other half of that question, if I'm, and I don't want to extrapolate too much here, is, okay, what happened with why was there a change in analysis? There were two instances. On 3 February 2020 and 4 June 2021, Anthony Fauci had contact with the interagency. And how to sort of broadly generalize this is that contact was happily pursued within the IC. They wanted that contact. And he provided a curated list of subject matter experts, which coincidentally wrote the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. So it's not like he came in and said, you have to do X, Y, and Z. He provided recommendations. It's when you look at what has already been publicly released about Dr. Fauci, and then what you're seeing under the curtain at the IC, where you realize, okay, there is a narrative that was being generated by his contact, not just with experts here in the United States, but experts in Australia and the UK. And that's the public-facing piece. And, you know, he had tried to sort of keep his hands clear of, I didn't have anything to do with the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. But in the meantime, he's pushing those authors and individuals that have been in his orbit into the IC as experts. And in one email, which I'll describe to you, the person in charge of leading the 90-day study, he introduced himself to the community that on what they were supposed to be doing, and then the community said, listen, we've got these people we should be talking to, and another very senior NIC officer sent a direct email to him saying, hey, considering that Dr. Fauci is a public health expert, are you sure we should be relying on this? Shouldn't we have a separate set? And in this instance, the individual responded, no, in this case, Dr. Anthony Fauci is a subject matter expert.
Did anyone ever bring up that Anthony Fauci approved the research that went on in Wuhan, and that it might not be in his interest for the conclusion to be that it came from a lab that he had funded, that there might be a conflict? Did anybody ever bring up that he might not be an objective witness?
That was one example of an email. No one laid it out quite that clearly. You're piecing it together. We were piecing it together from multiple emails, from multiple agencies, multiple documents. It was more subtle than that. Nobody said this is happening, and unfortunately, I think they probably should have. It was all out there.
But your conclusion is that changing from the scientific consensus of it being from a lab to a neutral position by the CIA was significantly influenced by Anthony Fauci?
It was significantly influenced by Anthony Fauci's injecting himself into the IC.
He's a bad man, y'all. He's a bad man. I remember doing my stream with Ryan, and he told me about the beagle dogs that he had in the basically covered their heads with a net and then put a ton of mosquitoes in there to essentially bite their face off. I think it was just to kind of see what happened. Just fucking terrible person. Hollow soul. I'm just throwing shit around now, to be honest. But I'll tell you what, if he had anything to do with COVID, that man is the one that has to sleep at night, lay his head on his pillow, and think about that all night. I hope that is not the case. Just for humanity's sake, because if it happened with Fauci, who is part of the government, it's definitely going to happen again, right? Or it's already happened again in other places. What is that like with shoplifters? What does it say? Like every one you catch, there's 10 you didn't, or something like that. So is Fauci getting caught red-handed right here? But there are others involved in different ways that are also have their hands in that cookie jar. Like we heard about the Minneapolis stuff, all the fraud and the shit that was supposedly going on there. And then all of a sudden it's like all is quiet on the Western Front. Haven't heard much about Minneapolis, Minnesota for the last couple of weeks. Of course, there has been a lot of crazy shit going on, including a war that's not a war we're involved in. But at any rate, we kind of covered our main topics, did it in pretty good time here, about an hour and a half. Now, for those of you that are feeling a little night owlish, what I'm going to put on is a couple of David Icke conferences for probably about as long as I can take it until I need to go to bed, but I'm feeling kind of night owlish. So hang out, leave some comments in the chat if you have any thoughts, and let's watch some David Icke, shall we?
About the control and programming of perception. That's the only way the few, and it is a few compared with the global population, that the billions can be controlled. Manipulating how we interact with reality, keeping from us that we are consciousness, putting us in these bubbles of our sense of limitation, and I can't, manipulating the way we decode reality, and therefore making us see the world as the control system wants us to see it. That's the basis of all of it going through the day, because that's the basis of all of it going through the whole conspiracy. So yes, of course, on one level, it does manifest as dark suits sitting around a table discussing the next move. But that's still the play-out world of this conspiracy. It's not its origin. It goes beyond them into the advisors in the shadows, the Mandelsons in this country. Peter Mandelson, if he's not manipulating, he gets withdrawal symptoms, that man. And into the Rahm Emanuels, ditto, in America, the controller, handler of Barack Obama. It goes into deeper levels, beyond them, deep in the hidden secret society network. And eventually, it goes out of this dimension. And that's where this whole thing is really coming from. Beyond the frequency range of visible light. And it involves non-human entities. Some of them people call the Greys. The main ones, I would say, and have been saying for a long, long time, take a reptilian form. They operate outside. They can come into visible light. But in terms of the reptilian part of this, they can't stay here for that long. So people say, why don't they just come and take over? Because they can't, or they would. They can come for so long, but their vibrational difference, incompatibility, means they have to leave. They can't stay for long, although there are technological ways they can stay for longer. And they operate outside visible light, and they manipulate this reality through bloodlines, interbreeding bloodlines that I'll come to. And we call them the Illuminati families. So we operate with invisible light, but outside of that, sharing the same space, is infinite other worlds and realities. And if a so-called UFO comes into this reality, because it's coming into visible light from where we cannot decode, it just seems to appear out of flipping nowhere. Because what it's done, it hasn't actually come in, it's just changed its vibrational state to resonate with invisible light, and it's like, it came out of nowhere. And then how often do you see it? Honestly, mate, there was this bloody UFO, and it disappeared just in front of my eyes. What are you on, mate? You on the pop or what? What it's done is increased its vibrational resonance to go beyond on visible light. Therefore, to the observer, it disappears. It doesn't disappear at all. It's left visible light. And this range of frequency we call our world is being manipulated from vibrational frequencies beyond it. And Satanism is a network within visible light that interacts with these reptilian entities in various ways I'll get to before the end of the day. Places or areas of the heavens that come up, Orion comes up again and again in relation to these reptilians. And in terms of non-human visitations, so does the Pleiades, so does, in terms of the reptilians, area of the heavens they call the Draco constellation, which appropriately, coming through the word derivations, brings us draconian. And of course, draconian laws are the Orwellian laws coming in. Very, very appropriate. Sirius is involved as well. So, won't be able to get into this today. There's a lot more to know anyway, but so is what happened to Mars is all involved in this story, how it became the devastated place it was, but it is, but wasn't before. And when I talk about these areas of the heavens, I'm not necessarily talking about those places with invisible light, because just as we are multidimensional, so planets and stars, etc., are multidimensional. And just as a planet might be devastated within visible light, it's not necessarily devastated on other vibrational frequency levels of itself, because the Earth too operates in visible light, but also multi-levels, like everything else. Another major part of this story is that when these reptilian entities started intervening, they manipulated human genetics through interbreeding, not necessarily physical interbreeding through technological methods, and also changing human form by changing the messages, the information, I'll come to this before we finish this section, that the DNA is picking up. And through that, you can change a form by changing the information the DNA is picking up. And it's no accident that humans have massive, fundamental reptilian genetics. This part of the brain, which scientists call the R complex or the reptilian brain, will be very, very important as we go through this second part of the day, because it's fundamental to how human behavior and human perception is manipulated to see the world as we currently see it. This interbreeding is talked about and recorded all across the world in the ancient accounts. Of course, I guess because it's the Bible, the best known is this section from Genesis. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were the old men of renown. But that's just the biblical version. Got a frog in my throat, the reptilian going. All across the ancient world, you see similar stories and accounts of this interbreeding. Something else goes parallel with the reptilian story. Again, not just in the Bible with the Garden of Eden and all that stuff, which of course the serpent was dominant, but across the ancient accounts. And that is the connection between the reptilian intervention and what we call the fall of man. And again, this is universal. And these themes will come together again and again as we go through this next part. The ancient accounts, again, we're talking that part of the Yuga cycle, which they call the Golden Age, talk about the fact that there was a time when humans were so unbelievably different to how we are today. They were connected to higher levels of consciousness. They were in this world, but they were certainly not of it. They were capable of incredible feats, and they lived what we would call impossible lengths of time in terms of age. And then there was a sudden change, the fall of man, as it was called. What I call this is the schism. There was an energetic schism at the level of the metaphysical universe, the waveform-based information construct, and that, as it was decoded through into this holographic reality, obviously mirrored in the holographic play-out world the schism in the information construct. And this is a portrayal of that, a symbolic portrayal of that. Anything that happens here gets decoded through to there, and this is where the schism happened. It was like a distortion in the information. Thanks, mate. Cheers. You put the gin in, right? It was a distortion in the base information construct, and I'll be coming to how that happened. There were many consequences for this, and one of them was it wasn't just a schism in the energetic level of the world itself. There was a schism was passed through into human personalities. We became distorted also from the magnificence and harmony that we were before. And we went from that to this. And we're now at the point where we're coming out of that. And there was also genetic manipulation to stop us accessing ranges of frequency that we did before. This is a major reason, not the only reason, but it is a major reason why scientists call 95% of human DNA junk DNA, because they don't know what it does. This is the reason, not the only reason, but a major reason why we only use a fraction of our brain's capacity. This is why billions of cells in that bridge, the corpus callosum, don't seem to be doing anything. They've been switched off. We've been put into a state that disconnects us and therefore makes us controllable, makes us farmable. So you've got this reptilian group, and the ones involved appear to be relatively small in number, tiny compared with the global population, and this is why they're terrified of being exposed. That's a constant theme all the way through it, wherever you look. And they've imprisoned humanity, or sought to, in this tiny frequency range of perception called visible light. Another key aspect to this is that they created hybrid bloodlines specifically to be the middle men and women. They became known in the ancient world as the demigods, the people, the children of the gods, part human, part god, as these serpent gods were perceived. And they were to be, like I say, the middlemen and women operating in visible light for the outside visible light control system. And it's appropriate that the caduceus and the symbol of the medical profession is the DNA, in effect, portrayed as two snakes. Because to these reptilian geneticists who were far ahead of where we are in public arena in terms of genetics and understanding, the DNA is a software program. And so they manipulate it for their own means. And this is crucial to understand the world that we live in. One seriously important aspect to this DNA, this hybrid DNA I'm talking about, is that it has eliminated what we call empathy. The ability to decode the emotion of empathy. Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of all behavior. If I can empathize with the consequences for others of my actions, that limits and balances my actions. If I have no empathy because I cannot empathize, then there are no limits. There is nothing that won't do. 3,000 dead on 9/11, who cares? Who cares? That's what we're dealing with. And this is vital to get across. If we look at this information on the basis of thinking I wouldn't do that, so they wouldn't do it, then we're going to miss the plot completely. Because that's not like that. No, you wouldn't do it. They would, and have no emotional comeback whatsoever. The reason for the interbreeding, the hybrid, is vibrational compatibility. These hybrids have a greater infusion of reptilian DNA than the general population, although we have a lot. And therefore, the resonance is sympathetic to the resonance of these entities operating just outside visible light. And through this resonant connection, like two radio stations talking to each other, the possessing entity outside of visible light can control the thoughts, actions, perceptions of the intermediary, the demigod. And of course, the theme of possession is as old as history, right up to the present day. We look at these people. All these pictures are by Neil Haig, by the way. Anything that looks like this. Great friend of mine, great artist. And this image symbolizes the fact that he looks at him with invisible light and he sees George Bush, nothing else. What people don't see, because it's outside the frequency range of their decoding system, is there are entities around these people who are actually controlling these people's thoughts, actions, etc. A number of psychics have said to me around the world how they've seen people walking along the street or wherever, and then they've seen like an ethereal reptilian entity locking into these bottom two chakra points, the emotional level, one of them is, and floating around with them. And this is a kind of a good analogy. You know when there's scientists in a laboratory and they're trying to work with something that they can't touch because it's too dangerous, what they're working with will be in a tank, and they'll put gloves on, which allows them to be outside the tank, but to manipulate inside the tank. Well, that is a very good symbol of what I'm talking about. These Illuminati bloodlines, these hybrid bloodlines, operate like those gloves, operating inside this reality. And Neil symbolizes these Illuminati families with invisible light as this bearded man. Whenever you see him as we go along, that is symbolic of the Illuminati families controlled beyond human sight by these reptilian entities. When the world started to recover from great geological catastrophes, which I'll come to in a second, there were areas of the world that stood out in terms of their abilities and potentials and advancement. These were some of them. And this area is particularly important to the bloodlines I'm talking about. The area that was once called Sumer, thousands of years BC, and became Babylon. This is why Babylon comes up in the writings of these people so often. And it's Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. They didn't invade Iraq just for oil or just for anything. They didn't invade it for one thing, but multiple things. But one reason they're so obsessed with Iraq is because to these bloodlines in control of the world today, this is a very significant, almost religious piece of land of historical importance to them. As Sumer and Babylon broke up, these bloodlines started going walkabout. They became the royal families of the world. And what do royal families claim? The right to rule because of the divine right to rule. The Chinese emperors used to claim the right to be emperor because of their genetic connection to the serpent gods. And this is a theme all across the world between the serpent gods and royalty. They became the aristocracy and the royal families, claiming the right to rule because of their DNA. Just down the bloody road from here, we have a head of state in Britain to this day who is only head of state because of her DNA. Head of state because of her DNA. I actually made a complaint, nothing happened to it, but I made a complaint to the Race Relations Commission, or whatever they call it. They said, if you see racism, report it. So I reported the royal family. I thought, well, I mean, you would. You would. Because they go, racism, we must stop racism. All these bloody politicians go, well, get down to Buckingham Palace then. You're saying you can only be head of state, not only if you're bloody white, effectively, but if you only come from the same bloody family. Ridiculous. Anyway, it's always been and it still is. And so these aristocratic and royal families moved on. Eventually, when the people started to rebel against overt royal control dictatorship, these families, some of them stayed in the royal families overtly, and there's still some around, like ours. But these families moved into politics, into banking, into business, and became the dark suit, but they still perceive themselves as royalty, as special because of this genetic connection to the serpent gods. And through the British Empire, the so-called Great British Empire, and the other European empires, as these bloodlines moved up into Europe from the Middle East, etc., they exported these bloodlines all over the world. And we saw them in power in what we call colonization. But there's two types of control. One has a finite life, one can go on forever until it's exposed. The one that has a finite life is a dictatorship that the people under dictatorship can see, touch, and taste. Communism, fascism, apartheid. People know where they stand, and eventually, therefore, they will rebel against it because they know what they're dealing with. The greatest form of control is a control you can't see. Prison without the bars. You can't see the bars because you'll just sit there. People do not rebel against not being free when they think they are. And that's the idea of replacing the colony control with another kind of control called freedom. So what happened is, as these colonies, like the United States as it became, etc., and all the others around the world, as they were given independence, what was left out in those countries were the bloodline under different names, the secret society network that manipulates the bloodline agenda, and those countries have gone on being controlled ever since. But because they have the ability to have a vote every 4 or 5 years, they don't realize they live in a tyranny. And that's how it works, the prison without the bars. And until it's exposed, it'll go on forever. And so these kind of people, especially the Rothschilds, they are major, major players in this. They are the middlemen for the manipulation of this reality from these entities mostly outside of this reality. And what they've created is like a global transnational corporation. What you have with a corporation is you have a headquarters somewhere in the world, and then in each country you have subsidiary companies of that headquarters, that central point. And all the subsidiaries in the world carry out the policy of the central point. Well, what these Illuminati hybrid family networks have done is create exactly the same, but instead of companies, they are secret society networks. So you've got the center of the web in Europe for historical reasons, at operational level anyway, people at places like London, not the British government, the secret society center in London. In Rome is another one, the Roman Church, Rome, and other points in Europe. And then in each country, you have families from the network in those countries whose job it is to run the networks that control that country's business, banking, politics, media, all of it. And so what you have is from this central point in Europe, the center of the web, all these different places and countries all over the world then impose on their country what is being dictated here. And that's why as I travel around the world, I see the same things being introduced in different countries at the same time, overwhelmingly justified by the same excuses. It's all a global network. It can be symbolized too as a web, like I say, with the Rothschilds real close to the spider, and all these different strands on the web are different secret societies, different semi-secret societies, transnational corporations, and all the rest of it. So when you see all these different names of these corporations that dominate the world in so many ways, and the pharmaceutical cartel and the oil cartel and all the rest of it, the biotech cartel, they're all different names or different masks on the same one face. And so you have this structure where outside of visible light, you have the reptilian control system comes down through the Illuminati families, and they control the people in power to push the world in a certain direction. Another way of looking at it here. You see, all these different people, these fight among themselves and all the rest of it, though if it gets out of hand, they get sorted. So these sit on the top of all these different countries. They control these different areas of their societies, and the people are then played off against each other. These buggers don't go to war. They tell these buggers to go to war. And if we stop going to bloody war, game over. But we do. Ridiculous. That's part of becoming conscious. So these people are just pawns in a game, in a way, genetic pawns in a game. They're just kind of shells to play out this agenda with invisible light. I mean, some batches are better than others, of course. So if you look at the principle of the Trojan horse, the symbol of the Trojan horse, coming into a society and not seeming to be what it is, though taking it over, and you put that on the face, well, you pretty much got symbolically what we're talking about here. People send me pictures from around the world and stuff that they find on the internet and elsewhere, which have a kind of reptilian feel about them. I'm not saying these are reptilian eyes, it could be a trick of the light, but I've used it because it gives an indication of the number of people that have told me this all around the world, from all walks of life, how they've seen people shift from a human to a reptilian state, and especially the eyes are the first to go. They describe how the pupils become Reptilian. And interestingly, a great friend of mine has an associate who, I don't agree with it, but he's been doing a research project to develop iris scan technology. And it led to him looking very deeply into 2,300 eyes. And he said he knew nothing about what I'm saying, probably never heard of me. And he said to my friend, the amazing thing was that about 4% appeared to be of reptilian type and appearance. And that is a recurring number, in my research anyway. 4-5% seem to be of this hybrid nature. So these people are reptilian hybrid human reptilians. And you look at the eyes, but behind the eyes are something else. I had an experience with this guy, Ted Heath. He was Prime Minister of Britain from 1970 to 74, took us into the European Union as it became. And it's a long story, I've told it before, but he looked at me in a dressing room in a television station. And as he looked at me, this is what his eyes did. His eyes went completely black, everything. And as I looked into his eyes, it must have been like that for, I don't know, maybe a minute, 2 minutes. And as I looked into his eyes, I said at the time, it was like looking into two black holes, because you couldn't make eye contact because there was no contact. And it was like, as I...
That's so crazy, because I oftentimes, and the reason I wanted to kind of dive into this is because I wonder if reptilian is more of a symbolic thing, or do people actually believe they are lizards, like legit? Like if you remember that old TV show V, where the aliens visited and they look like people and everything, but it took the skin off and they were like lizards, like cold-blooded fucking lizards. Is that the case? Or are we talking about just a level of person, kind of this elite, super rich person that's raised with whatever they want, is kind of soulless and will do whatever it takes to get more? Is that a reptilian, or is a reptilian an actual lizard being? I don't know, but when I hear David Icke talk like this, it reminds me of Aldous Huxley. And I don't know if you know who that is, but here's Aldous Huxley in 1958 talking about the control mechanisms that we will have to deal with today.
Wallace. Tonight's guest, Aldous Huxley, is a man of letters, as disturbing as he is distinguished. Who and what are the enemies of freedom here in the United States?
Well, I don't think you can say who in the United States. I don't think there are any sinister persons deliberately trying to rob people of their freedom. But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes to use can use to accelerate this process of going away from freedom, of imposing control.
Well, what are these forces and these devices, Mr. Huxley?
The first of them is not exceedingly important in the United States at the present time, though very important in other countries. This is the force which in general terms can be called overpopulation, the mounting pressure of population pressing upon existing resources. Today, the population of the Earth is rising at such a rate that it will double in half a century. Well, another force which I think is very strongly operative in this country is the force of what may be called over-organization. As technology becomes more and more complicated, it becomes necessary to have more and more elaborate organizations, more hierarchical organizations. Now, I think what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. Once you've established a principle that something works, you can be absolutely sure that the technology of it is going to improve steadily. I mean, what does a democracy depend on? A democracy depends on the individual voter making an intelligent and rational choice for what he regards as his enlightened self-interest in any given circumstance. Well, I mean, here, this whole question of children, I think, is a terribly important one, because the children are quite clearly much more suggestible than the average grown-up. And again, I suppose that that for one reason or another, all the propaganda was in the hands of one or very few agencies. You would have an extraordinarily powerful force playing on these children, who after all are going to grow up and be adults quite soon.
Why is it that the wrong people will use these various devices and for the wrong motives?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that these are all instruments for obtaining power, and obviously the passion for power is one of the most moving passions that exist in man, and after all, this is all democracies are based on the proposition that power is very dangerous and that it's extremely important not to let any one man or any one small group have too much power for too long a time. I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values, group morality, group ethic, which speaks about the group as though the group was somehow more important than the individual. But this seems, as far as I'm concerned, to be in contradiction with what we know about the genetical makeup of human beings, that every human being is unique. And I think it's extremely important for us to stress this in all our educational life. And I would say it's also very important to teach people to be on their guard against the sort of verbal booby traps into which they're always being led, to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Is freedom necessary?
As far as I'm concerned, it is, yes.
Is it necessary for a productive society?
Yes, I should say it is. I mean, a genuinely productive society. I mean, I think you could produce plenty of goods without much freedom, but I think the whole sort of creative life of man is ultimately impossible without a considerable measure of individual freedom, of initiative, creation, all these things which we value, and I think value properly, are impossible without a large measure of freedom.
Amazing, right? 1958. And here we are today, and it's like the same exact situation. It's, if you read A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, it's so crazy because at that time, there weren't antidepressant drugs. There were other drugs, like you could get meth, but they didn't have like Prozac back then. So he invented this drug. I think he called it Soma. And it was this drug that everybody would take in the future if they were ever feeling disturbed about how things were. They would take this drug and they'd be okay to kind of just keep on keeping on. And instead of women having babies, they had this kind of incubator system. There were no relationships because everybody is everybody else's. So if you're a dude, you can just sleep with whoever you want. Super weird. But talking about like safe spaces in the 50s, it's pretty wild. It's a really good read. So I've switched the David Icke up. This one's a little more personable. This one is at Oxford Union, and the crowd's a little bit smaller. And it's Icke just presenting to the small group. So I think this will be a good one. Looks like a couple of people are tuning in and passing out. Love to hear it, Albert. Glad to be here for you, buddy. I'll be there soon, I'm sure. Well, let's listen to some Icke here in kind of a little more intimate setting. It's our knowledge in science. We're realizing we know less and less than we thought we knew. Right? You had all these scientists convinced, oh, solar system is this old, the Earth is this old, civilizations are this old. But as more and more advanced research methods are developed, we're starting to find out, oh shit, that's actually not correct. The solar system is actually younger and bigger than we thought it was. There maybe have been human civilizations around years, centuries before we thought they were around, possibly. So it's kind of a closed-minded way to look at it. Jump on that mainstream science bandwagon, and you'll never lose, because, I mean, mainstream loses all the time. What's crazy, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson right now, right? That guy is railed against anyone that has said they think there's something to this UFO or UAP phenomena. I mean, has literally laughed in people's faces, completely disrespectful. And now he wrote a book about aliens, and he's out there on these mainstream news media outlets talking about aliens. Like, what the fuck? You used to laugh at people for this. So crazy. I mean, I guess there's part of me that's happy that he's changing his tune, but there's also another part of me that's like, oh, he just doesn't have any conviction, or he's just trying to make a quick buck, kind of a thing. All right, back to Icke. He's much more interesting to me. Did you hear that? Generation after me. What is that, like Generation Z, millennials? Yeah. The TikTokers, what we're doing now on X, YouTube, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, all of it is we're putting our life inside of this little screen, this little safe area, and that's where a lot of people, not everyone, that's where a lot of people are living. It's kind of crazy to think about. And if you can control the messages and information that's coming through that little trusted screen that you have, then you can kind of control and manipulate that person's reality, right? This was something I've seen at kind of the highest levels of security back in the day, where folks would try to set up what's called like a mesh network. And if they can get a certain audience inside of a mesh network, they can make sure they're all receiving similar messages on their devices. And you can just imagine all the different things you could do with that. It's so true. Like, it doesn't matter, who you vote for. Like, my wife's to the point now where she doesn't even want to vote. And I just never thought, I'm not there yet. I served in the military, and I've always been very passionate about history and our story. But as I get older, I start realizing it is just a story, right? The winners get to write the books, not the losers. So we basically, when we went to school in America here, we were essentially indoctrinated into being an American. And I love being an American. But that should empower us to ask our leaders tough questions, not instill fear in us. So it's weird how things have been twisted up so much. Like the universities and colleges, you would think that is where someone would go to really expand their mind. And so to hear something like safe spaces or what you're saying is offending me in my space, it's just crazy to think that we're hearing that in this country, and especially on college campuses where people are supposed to be more open, because you're kind of trying to figure out who you are at that point. So I don't know who's been behind the movement, if there's anyone behind the movement, or it's just kind of the way that things have progressed in politics. But he's 100% right when he says it doesn't matter who wins. They all do the same shit. And Obama did break my heart. He was really the last president I believed in. I thought he was going to do great things, and he just did more of what the previous guys had done. Nothing new. Just the same old with the same old people. I don't know if y'all are picking up that audio issue. Let's see.
Repeater.
Shit, those attacks in Syria, where they're pulling those kids out. Holy moly. Those are tough to watch, tough to see, especially like if you have a little one. Speaking of which, there was a story that I didn't get to that I teased out earlier, probably on purpose, because it's like a total bummer. But I showed this earlier, the Afghan family selling children. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of the article here from this section. This is from the wife and mom. All we have to eat is bread and hot water, not even tea, says the mother, Kayan. The choice to sell their daughters over sons is because culturally, sons are widely seen as future breadwinners here in Afghanistan. With Taliban's restrictions on education and work for women and girls, it is even more pronounced. So that's right. Ever since we left, girls aren't allowed to go to school there, which makes perfect sense. Two of Abdul and Kian's teenage sons work polishing shoes in the town center. Another collects rubbish, which Kian uses as fuel for cooking. Saeed Ahmad tells us he has already been forced to sell his 5-year-old daughter, Shikwa, after she got appendicitis and a cyst in her liver. I've had no money to pay for the medical expenses, so I sold my daughter to a relative, he says. How fucking what? You sold your 5-year-old daughter and to put salt in the wound to a relative? Oh my God. But anyway, yeah, the story goes on to describe just how bad it is there for most Afghanistan civilians right now. They are barely getting by. Many are starving, and they are being put in these positions where they're having to sell young girls to grown-ass men so that they can feed the rest of their family. That is about as fucked up as it gets. So when you hear David Icke here talking about like realities and what reality is, think about that. Like our reality is already so much better than so many other people's realities. So if you're feeling down, just remember there's somebody out there fighting right now that probably has it 10 times worse. So you got this. You can do this. All right, let's get back to Icke here. Oh my God, that reminds me of like the other day. I was watching the Kash Patel hearing, and he talked about how they spoiled terror plots in Los Angeles or something like that, like 4 terror plots they spoiled or something. And it made me think back to, because I'm from Portland, where like a bunch of FBI field agents, like 10 or 12 of them or something, got together and acted like this like terrorist wannabe squad, and then convinced this kid, hey, we'll set up the bomb, we'll set up the van where it needs to be in Pioneer Square in downtown Portland. We're just going to give you the trigger, and when we say hit that trigger button to detonate the bomb. And this kid's like 18, stupid as fuck, idealistic, right? He's got these FBI guys working him for months about giving his life for the cause or whatever, or making a difference. And then so he pushes the button. Of course, nothing happens because it's a sting operation, and they arrest him for a terrorist plot. But the thing is, like, he would have never had that plot had the FBI not stepped in and provided all of that for him. So I'm not sure. It just makes me wonder if these terrorist plots they're bragging about stopping now is the same kind of situation, because those are. Oh boy, man, this guy is so great. David Icke, y'all. You can, I'm about to call it a night here. I'm getting sleepy. But you can go to YouTube. The man literally, like, there's people that have posted 7-hour plus conferences of the man. The breadth of knowledge with a D, breadth of knowledge that the man has is absolutely impressive. And he does seem very certain and sure of himself when he's talking about things like reptilians and the gray aliens and so on and so forth. But in his mind, in his truth and his reality, he's figured this stuff out already. And so he just speaks with a lot of conviction about what he believes is going on. I'm still torn whether we should be looking at these things as actual physical reptile beings, or is it a more kind of metaphor for people that sort of sell out and sell their soul for greed and power? Or is it both, right? Like, could there be both things? Both could be true at the same time. So very interesting. We're probably going to do another episode on reptilians to get a little more deep into the history of it and how it changed so much over time. But again, the crazy thing with the reptilians is the mythos of the serpent goes back thousands of years. But even that mythos, they have always been a part of the earth. They were never aliens or ETs. So when we do hear people like Eric Davis say to Representative Burleson that, you know, reptilians is one of the 4 types of alien ETs, it really makes you question Eric Davis's actual knowledge in the field, right? what he's actually been exposed to. So yeah, hey, great night. Thanks y'all for hanging out with me. Great Owl, love it when you hang out and throw some stuff in the chat we can talk about. Good times. Everyone else, have a great night. Thanks for joining me on this podcast, and I will see you next time for some more freaking crazy updates. I'll tell you what, this COVID thing, y'all, we're all hyped up on UFO disclosure and stuff, but they are disclosing what happened with COVID right now in these hearings. So pay attention, read up. What they did for us, what they did to us with COVID is straight fucked up. I agree, Albert. Icke is a man. He really is. Just a super cool, unique individual. Absolutely. All right, y'all. Have a great night. And I'll see you next time.